increase went from 60 to 100%.
Correct.
Yes. See,
Correct.
I'm more than just a dumb butcher.
Some days I'm more than just a dumb farmer.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
Regardless of quality is right. And speaking of quality product, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Jen, one of the owners of Three Sisters Cattle Company, located here on Whidbey Island in the great state of Washington, talking about how do you turn or know when to turn a family hobby into a business. And that's huge because right now, as we talk about, there's a lot of lifestyle farmers or hobby farmers, or I'm not knocking any of that. But when does the transition change that I could solely rely on this for my income, for other people's income, without working yourself to death? And granted, I know farming is very labor intensive, and maybe that will never happen because this is a meat podcast. But good meat comes from good soil, comes from good grass, comes from good foliage, comes from good animals, good farmers. It's all working together. Hope you enjoyed this episode because I certainly did. Today's episode of the Meat Block Podcast is brought to you by Bunzl Processor Division. Bunzl Processor Division has been in the food processing and packaging industry for over 140 years. That's right, they're celebrating their 140th this year. Congratulations. Happy birthday or anniversary. Offering over 35,000 of high-quality products designed specifically to meet the needs of meat processing, butchery, food processing, janitorial, and industrial industries. BPD also specializes in packaging equipment and supplies, offering multi-pack P-Series line of chamber packaging machines, as well as Clarity line of shrink bags, roll stock films, and vacuum pouches. They have numerous product experts on hand and offer outstanding customer service. They offer free UPS ground shipping on orders of $500 and more. And when you're placing your next order, which I know you will, let them know that you are a AAMP member. And if you're not an AAMP member, then you better be. If you don't know what that is, then Google it, and most likely you want to be it. That's the American Association of Meat Processors. It's a great resource, and being a member, it also benefits when you order from bunzlpd.com. If you're a small meat processor, then you may be having difficulties like I am getting cut sheets in on time, calling everybody, hunting people down, and just trying to streamline your business, and you're finding that to be your bottleneck. If that's the case, I would check out smartlockerusa.com. It's a great tool for small processors or even larger side processors to communicate with the farmer, grower, and or customer to get the cut sheet in on time. If you're interested and you get it, use MeatBlock 2022 as the promo code, and you will get your installation fee waived. All right, on with the show. Jennifer, Jenny, tell me what you prefer to go by.
Jen. Most people call me Jen.
Okay. And then what do you do what is your line of work, I guess?
So for me, my line of work, I am one of the owners of Three Sisters, but my aspect of it, I'm the production manager. So everything, ag related on the farm, I manage and take care of. So, to break it down and put it really simply, everything alive in the form of a product, everything that we produce when it's alive is my responsibility. Once it's killed, it moves off to somebody else's responsibility.
Well, as someone who's been in the other end of the industry, I don't know which end is more romanticized, because I know a lot of people who want to become farmers and want to be small producers, and you see these. I think once your dad said that they were. I can't call them hobby farmers anymore. I have to call
They're lifestyle farmers.
Lifestyle farmers.
Yeah.
And but then I see this. People also want to have this boutique romanticized view of this industry of butchery as well.
Right.
So and I certainly see that on one side. What do you see as far as people who are young, and how do you encourage, I guess, like, or root out, like, you have people who are passionate and then you have people who are idealistic, in what separates and what produces longevity, I guess.
So I think there's another aspect to that you have to take into account. There are those who are realistic about it.
Mm-hmm.
So people can get caught up in the Pollyanna, Charlotte's Web, perfect little farmette that is wonderful and can be self-sustaining for their family. When you scale up and try to build a business out of it, you have to, in a sense, walk away from some of the emotion of it and look at it in the cents and dollars, because you can quickly find yourself in a really, really big, deep hole if you don't look at the feasibility of it. Does it make sense? And it's something that my generation really wants to do. And I think it's fabulous. And I think people really need to take a look and figure out where their food in general, not just meat, but food in general, is coming from. But with that, go, okay, am I going to produce for my family, or am I going to produce for my family and the neighbors and do a little bit of a community deed, or am I going to make a full-blown business out of it? And that's the first decision in your approach and what you're going to do. It's a life choice. You have to be willing to make sacrifices, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. But you also have to be realistic and be able to step back and put, a pencil to paper and go, okay, does this financially make sense for me? Most of the time you can make it work.
Yeah.
Some hard work, some dedication. There are lots and lots of resources, especially, and I'll say it, post-pandemic. There are so many different resources out there to help you get a business up and going. You have to go searching for it. It's a love. You have to love it. But like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. The world? No, I'm joking.
Pretty close.
So we've got 6 minutes in so far, and I feel embarrassed that I haven't mentioned the name of the farm that you work at. So do you want to say that?
Sure. So we own and operate Three Sisters. Three Sisters Family Farms is the name, but we also have Three Sisters Market. So it's a 7-day-a-week specialty grocery store. It is located just south of Oak Harbor, halfway between Oak Harbor and Coopville. It's a cute little 2-bay fire station painted red. You can find all of our meat products there, as well as a couple hundred other local products, everything from lotions and potions to jams and jellies, some crafts, a very large gluten-free section. But our business is based around the production, raising beef, pork, lamb. We also offer chicken, as well as eggs.
And all local to Woodby.
All local to Woodby Island. Yeah. Everything is born and raised here on the farm.
Awesome. And then so we talked about your role, but what's the background? Because I know you and I have had conversations that, you had formal education in one thing, and then I know a little bit about your parents' background, but what explain how there was that switch where you're like, we talked about how you love it, but what got you into it, to make you love it?
So growing up, we had a 200 cow dairy farm, and that's what the family had run for generations. Multiple generations were dairy cows. When we made the final decision in the early 2000s to sell the herd, I kind of fell out of love with the idea of farming and being in agriculture. I think there was just a lot of heartache that went along with selling everything, all the animals that I'd known for 18 years left in a series of trucks one day. And I think that was very heartbreaking. So I left for college a couple of months later, and I already had an idea. I kind of wanted to do something else. So I actually have a degree in criminal justice. And finished up 4 years of college. I was a college athlete and came home and actually tried to get hired on the force locally. And it just, the timing was not right. And so I, jumped in and helped on the farm as I did every summer, because that's what you do. And I realized that after being gone for 4 years to college, I kind of really missed the farm and really missed being out with the animals and outside. And I realized that maybe going into law enforcement wasn't my calling. So I picked back up working on the farm, and I haven't looked back. And I met this really cute neighbor boy, and we got married, and we've got two little girls that I get to raise on the farm now with me while I'm working. And like I said, I wouldn't trade the experience and the opportunities that I get now from all of that. I mean, I get to watch my kids grow up on the farm as I did with my parents, whom did it with my grandparents, and I had my grandparents on the farm. It's this really cool multi-generational aspect of it that is truly heartwarming, and not everyone gets to do that. And if you're a first generation farmer, it's something you're kind of yearning for. Mm-hmm. And that's your goal, is that you can maybe get there someday. And I am blessed because I get to live that.
Yeah. And I'm not a farmer by any means, nor will I ever claim to be one, because it's incredibly hard work. But there is a certain pride, and I could only imagine watching your kids grow up and learning how to, want to jump in the seat of a skid steer, or wanting to, ride an ATV or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt that, and one of the things, the business has different aspects of it, so it can and has kind of molded around how each of us girls has wanted to play a part in the business. And I look at that with my girls, and maybe they don't want to have a part on the farm when they're older, and that's totally fine. Maybe they do, and we'll figure out how to fit them in. But exposing them and giving them the opportunities to dream and explore and experience living on a farm is, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, is priceless.
Yeah. It's not cliche. I think being proud of how you raise your kids is essentially not just American dream, anyone's dream. And yeah, that's awesome. So when you came back from school and you started helping out and realizing that this is now, was there a watershed moment where you're like, this is my career? Do you remember what you were doing or was it like him and hawing, or what was there, like the light switch?
I don't know if there was truly a light switch moment. I think it was more or less, I came to the realization that I was comfortable where I was at. I'm not a small person. I'm a 6'4". I kind of stand out in a crowd. I've always been that way. And I always felt at home or at ease or in my own true self when I was out on the farm and with the animals. I mean, I'm sure there were definitely light bulb moments,
Mm-hmm.
but it really just felt in a sense that I just at peace, like this is home. This is where I belong. This all makes sense. And all of this has been a slow progression from, in a sense, I was just kind of working on the farm to now full on making big financial calls, plants, doing most of the planting by myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have help. I have people that jump in and help me. My dad's in and out. My husband helps. I've got a couple part-time employees. I've got one full-time employee. So I'm not by any means doing this on my own, but I am to the juncture where I think that, I mean, yes, collectively in some of our big decisions, we still all get together, but I think for the most part, day to day, I'm making the decisions on going forward.
Mm-hmm. And then I want to talk about so I have the pleasure of cutting your the animals you raise. But what are the numbers that you're bringing to market in where that started when the business went from a dairy to a beef operation, then the scalability? There's like a lot in that one question.
Right. So when we originally started Three Sisters, it was based around the idea that we had already been selling just some crossbred dairy beef animals, finished animals to like neighbors and friends and so on, just like you do, kind of a community deed, help out, sell to your local community and your neighbor. And when we started it, it was the idea, I mean, we were little girls. The idea was, okay, 3 kids, all within 6.5 or 7 years of each other, colleges, weddings, all of these things. How are my folks, how are my parents going to afford all of that? That's the basis of where Three Sisters started with the beef. And it went from, just a couple crossbred calves a year to, okay, let's run a herd of like 30 cows. And my parents did that for a while. And then it became like, okay, let's run a herd of 100 cows. We did that for a while. Now we're running a herd of a couple hundred cows. And then when I came home from college, that's when we pulled the trigger. And I'm still to this day pretty convinced my mom was upset with us. But my dad and I went and bought 2 sows and a boar off of Craigslist and brought them home. We were like, oh, look, we bought pigs. And she was like, what? And that was the start of our breeding program for the hogs.
Mm-hmm.
And now I could fluctuate on the hogs, but I've carried all the way up to 15 sows. So I'm farrow to finish. So the hogs played in, and then it's a family friend of ours was like, hey, I've got more lamb than we need that I have sale for. Would you be interested? So I bought lamb from her 1 year. And then the next year it was from her and the neighbor. And then within a couple of years, I was out buying, these lamb. And I'm like, why am I out buying lamb when I could be producing and raising it myself? Which then morphed into, I have my own flock and we're in the heart of lambing right now. And so I lamb out in January, and then I'll turn around and I'll farrow here in the next month or so. And then I start in with calving and spring field work. So all of these species have evolved over time. And then 3 years ago, we decided we have this need, this demand for chicken. And so we started in with chicken, and we have been raising meat birds for either 3 or 4 years now. Probably one of my least favorite, but the people really, really love having local chicken, which is processed differently and in a different plant than the beef, the pork, and the lamb are.
Yeah. I worked in poultry processing for like 2 years. And,
yeah.
It's gross. Um,
That's not my forte.
Yeah. What kind of dairy was it? Was it like
we had Guernseys and Jerseys, so the brown ones.
okay. And so more like a buttermilk breed or
Yeah,
okay.
high fat breed, yeah.
Okay. And then when you started your breeding program for your cattle, because people don't necessarily want Jersey beef. What did that look like?
If you crossed the Jerseys and the Guernseys with beef, you didn't end up with a really tall, lanky animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it took a little bit longer to finish, but usually the beef stood out. The genetics of the beef the beef, which I think they were either crossing. We did a little bit of both. We had Hereford and Angus that we were crossing with the few cows. That was back in the day when we were AIing stuff, because that's what you did for genetics with the dairy and so on and so forth. But quickly determined, one, that a dairy beef cross, they're excellent mothers because they produce lots of milk and they have a great mothering instinct.
Yeah.
So they raise some awesome calves. And two, then the product out of them made a great beef animal. It's a finished animal. It was just at that juncture was 3/4 beef and just a quarter dairy. And you really got some. We all said that those were some of the best years, some of the best animals, docility wise, conformation wise, so on and so forth. But we also had different genetics playing into that. Now I've switched over. Everything is Angus. I've kind of stuck with Black Angus for quite a few years and actually kind of have fallen out of love with Black Angus and have switched over to Red Angus. It's just a preference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't it.
Is it temperament or is it personal or is it flavor or yield, marbling?
No, what it came down to was when I was handling them, I didn't love the demeanor of some of the Black Angus that I had been handling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to just kind of take a swing at it and switch to Red. And the docility of them is fabulous. I have very, very few complaints, and maybe it's just the breeder that I'm getting them from. But I had to really step back and think, one, I'm getting in with them. Mm-hmm. Two, my parents are getting in with them. And three, I have 2 little girls that are around. I can't afford to have anything that is going to have, in a sense, a bad attitude. That's how I explain it to my kids. If they have a bad attitude, they can't stay here. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's beef. It doesn't matter if it's pork. It doesn't matter the hogs. It doesn't matter if it's the sheep. If they have a bad attitude, they've got to go, because it's just too much of a risk for me. I'm not willing to take it, even if I have to take a loss in some aspect.
Yeah, well, if they have a potential to cause personal or anything like that damage, or like to hurt someone, heaven forbid that. That's the thing exactly. That's the thing with live animals, is that they're unpredictable. Essentially,
we could talk about the dead ones, because they can be unpredictable sometimes too.
Yeah, seriously. Nothing like joking about my TBI as we segue into an ad break. Just wanted to remind everyone out there about Bunzel Processor Division, bunzelpd.com. Check them out for all your processing needs. I'm serious, people. You need to check them out. Helping them helps me. Link is in the show notes. Also, I want you to check out smartlockerusa.com. You're a small business, small meat cutter, looking to scale, looking to streamline. You can't hire someone to call people and chase down cut sheets. Check out smartlockerusa.com using promo code MEATBLOCK 2022. Now, back to the hilarities. One thing that I've noticed about the beef Three Sisters bring to market, is the consistency of hot weight year round. So what does that look like as far as feeding and breeding or its cycles? Because I could tell, unfortunately, just being in this industry a very long time, when someone or when growers don't have that aligned, and it's like, oh, you could tell this person didn't plan for this time of the year.
Yeah. When feeding a beef animal, the quality of feed that you're putting in is very important. Like, I cannot stress that enough. And having grown up and for my parents, having lived in the dairy industry, every single calorie that you're putting to an animal needs to be maximized. So putting up quality feed is really, really important. Something that they learned how to do very well was put up quality feed. And if you can't put it up, you need to find something that can complement what you did put up, because there are years where it's droughty. There are years where you make a plethora of feed. There are years where you don't have high enough protein feed. Your nutrition that you're putting into your animal is very important. And you can get caught this time of year, January, December, February, the cold, dark months of the year. It's easy to get caught not putting enough or quality feed in front of your animal. And another aspect, we live in the Pacific Northwest, is wet, it is cold, it is windy. You've got to provide that animal at least some sort of shelter and some place dry to go lay down. Otherwise, they're using too many calories to just simply stay warm and not gain.
Yeah.
It's an aspect of the business that, once again, you have to be willing to step away from the emotions of it and go, okay, my goal and my job is to keep a high rate of gain. And what do I need to do in these off months when you're not out on pasture or you're not out on great pasture? What are you going to do to make up for those? So offering, some place to go out of the weather, someplace dry to lay down, and then putting quality feed in front of them, knowing, okay, you could see your first grasses the beginning of March if you've got an early spring, or it could be all the way to the middle of April if you've got a late spring. It just depends.
Yeah, and that's where so there's so many semantics in this industry where people are like grass fed, grass finished, always pastured, but it's like, well, if you do realize you want animals to be housed in the winter, otherwise that's kind of cruel, and then you also have to prepare by either cut your own silage, bunker it, or round bales. To one thing my good friend David told me when he was raising sheep poorly, he said that I first got to become a good grass grower before I could become a good sheep farmer.
Yeah, you have to understand all different facets of the business you're getting into. What is it going to take? So one of our crop rotations is to grow barley. Barley offsets the nutrients in the soil that the grasses take out. So after so many years, a grass seeding runs out of pizzazz, for lack of a better term. It just simply doesn't have the nutrients in the soil that it needs to be successful. We rotate through a barley crop, which is grain. We harvest it with our combine. We have the ability to store it, and I have the ability to turn it into grain for the hogs. So there's multiple parts to that. Growing the grain helps me because I can feed it to the hogs and I can feed it to the chickens, but it also helps the soils, which also then will in turn help the grass that I'll plant afterwards, which provides a higher quality feed in front of the cows. So yes, you have to learn how to grow a quality product to feed the animals, to grow a quality animal to produce a quality product.
Yeah. It's so good to hear that it's using rotational pasture essentially, because you need to recoup the nutrients that instead of the grass taking up, because you just see people just throwing money into it, or I don't know. I just see people not knowing how to do that.
Well, there's all sorts of ways, and that's one thing I think people need to acknowledge. There's all different ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might not have the ability to go in and plant like I would. I have equipment. You may not. There are different ways of doing it. You may do 5 acres. I may do 50 acres. There's no right or wrong way to it. And especially in today's day and age where there's all of these terms and ideas and methods of doing things, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way. But the one thing that you do have to know and understand when taking in all of this knowledge and all of these ideas of a way to do something, you've got to take it with a grain of salt. You've got to look at it and go, okay, that's a wonderful idea. How can I apply that? And what is the possibility of success? Is it justifiable enough? We live in a very unique climate here.
Mm-hmm.
It is sometimes exceptionally wet, and sometimes we even get really cold snaps. But the one thing people really have to acknowledge, we kind of have a dormant season here. Yes, grasses are growing, but at a very slow rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can spread your animals out, your stocking rate, okay, there's a science behind that as well. If you could, your stocking rate is such that you can spread your animals out, you're not going to do a whole lot of damage to your ground if you don't have the ability to put them inside a building or in a situation where you can control their living environment. If you can spread the animals out, you're great. If you try to condense them, you have to acknowledge that maybe that's going to be a little bit hard on the ground. But maybe that's what you're trying to, your end goal is maybe you want to beat it up a little bit. Maybe you want to, concentrate and throw a whole bunch of nutrients into one spot.
Mm-hmm.
There are all different methods of doing things. There is no right or wrong way. There may be successful, there may be not successful. What may be successful this year might not be successful next year because it all depends on the climate. And last time I checked, nobody had like the perfect little, crystal ball to tell you what the weather's going to do between now and, next week.
Well, that's what I find, so interesting. Even in here, Western Washington versus Eastern Washington, there's different climates.
Oh,
and
my
then
God.
Imagine all the different, with like all the different farming techniques that there has to be just over the world to produce protein, because everyone eats protein pretty much all over the world. And yes. I always tell people, like, if you're a vegetarian, that's a Western luxury because you get to choose to do that. But
yes. Well, no, it is. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, there is a world that has to be fed, and all the different demographics, of a population, all are going to need to consume some form of protein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just think it's weird when, I was traveling abroad, people were vegetarian most of their lives, not by choice.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there's so much that goes into it because, I think that just because someone else had a farm in one part of the world, they'd have to really learn how to adapt to farm in, say, Washington.
Exactly.
Because, I always thought pigs on this side of the mountain didn't do well because it was so wet, and there was just more bronchio issues associated with that.
Right. There can be, but no, I think what you have to acknowledge though is that there's probably a good portion of the year that you're not going to be able to have a rate of gain on a hog that is going to help to turn that dollar fast. And it's not about necessarily turning it fast. I don't know that fast is right as much as it is. You have to acknowledge you're just not going to turn that hog as fast. It just,
well, that your margin's not going to be as good, or
You're not going to have the margin on that hog because it's going to take you a little bit longer because we have cool and wet months in the wintertime. If you could, perfect scenario, you'd be either be seasonal or you'd have the ability to have inside and outside.
And
nobody's got the perfect scenario. I mean, maybe somebody does, but the perfect scenario doesn't totally exist. You kind of got to be able to morph it and work with the situation.
Yeah. And hogs is because hogs plateau. And when they plateau on feed and you're feeding them and keeping them alive because you want to not have 100% of a loss. Hogs, I don't like. Only redeeming thing about hogs is bacon. So
yes, bacon is no. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I really do like some breakfast sausage. The breakfast sausage is that's my gig. Hogs are interesting. I actually really enjoy the hogs. I find them very personable, and I think it's also I spend a lot of time with it. It ends up being that the breeding. My sows are I can see the barn from the house. They're right here at my house. So I spend quite a bit of time in there. My girls spend quite a bit of time in there. So I think they are far more personable, but I also spend so much time in there that I've in a sense made pets out of some of them. But the hogs are interesting. Even after all of these years, I still am surprised by hogs and what they do and how fast they grow and how they adapt. They're smart. Hogs are smart. I've constantly got to keep an eye on the fence to make sure that it is hot. We use electric wire to keep the hogs in. And that's outside when they're in outside pens. Inside pens, I have big box stall setups for them. So they can farrow kind of on their own in just a kind of an open straw pen. And I think I have probably found the most joy. Yeah, I think I've probably found the most joy at times sitting in the sow barn watching piglets be born and then so very quickly figure out life and where the snack is at and how to get around and then watch them grow. I mean, they grow exponentially. They grow so fast.
Yeah.
And within, a week, they've gone from this little tiny piglet to these little fat brown sausages that literally do hot laps around their mom. I really do enjoy the hogs. They sometimes are also my most frustrating because they are so smart. But raising hogs is definitely has its challenges. It's very rewarding. But I think for me, it's the start to finish aspect of it. And to make it even more fulfilling, I raised the grain. I can say I planted the grain, worked the ground, planted the grain, harvested the grain, hauled the grain, stored the grain, turned it into feed to feed a hog, which then I feed out into a product that I can put on the shelf and say, I did that.
Yeah. Well, so as much as I don't like hogs, it makes sense for you to have them because you have to have that rotation in your pasture to get your soil nutrients. So I won't dunk on them too bad. I guess
I'm not a huge fan of sheep. So.
Really, I don't like sheep. I don't like sheep mostly from a money standpoint. But
yes. Sheep. I think sheep are challenging. People have asked me, why don't you like sheep? I don't know that I could pinpoint why. I mean, it is another aspect of their business of our business that we wanted to offer. And so we went for it. I think sometimes I just don't feel like, a cow you look at and I can tell you that they're thinking about something. They're thinking about it. We worked cows today all day. Like It's been a long day, but we worked cows, and you can look at cows and you can tell, okay, you're thinking about something. What are you going to do? Same with hogs. You look at a hog and she's watching you. She's figuring out what she's going to do. I sometimes feel like I look at sheep and there's like nobody's home. There's just nobody there.
Yeah.
But I must admit, I've been packing around lambs the last couple of days, getting them situated in their pens after being born. Okay, yeah, baby lambs are cute.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. But
well, baby lambs are cute, but I feel like sheep's only instinct is to run away from me. And like me personally. And
if my husband were awake, he'd say sheep, they're just looking for a shady place to die.
Yeah, I don't know. In hogs and sheep, I've never been effed up more by any other animals. Like I'll get into a pen with beef, but like I've had sheep trip me when they're dead. I've had hogs back up and almost hyperextend my knees multiple times. I think the lesson here is I'm just not good in this industry overall. But
oh, that's okay. I have until last year, I had not ever had stitches on the farm.
Oh, I was there.
And you were there.
Yeah.
And what got me? A sheep.
A sheep. Yeah.
A sheep got me.
I remember that. And I'm gonna edit that part out. But not about the part you getting hurt, because that's hilarious.
Damn sheep. Tasted good.
Yeah. Well, I want to know. I got two more questions, because you're a farmer and you probably got to get up early, and I got to get up early and go to my work. What would you say your biggest challenge of being a farmer has been?
Has been or is?
Both.
Both. I think that probably one of the biggest challenges for me has been and is the ever-changing need based on the seasons. There's always this question, especially when you come out of like grass pasturing season, where you've got to start supplementing them. Okay, is that enough? Is that high enough protein? Like that never ends. That never ends from start to finish. You're constantly, okay, is that enough? Have I taken care of them? Has everything been done? The work itself never ends. You're always striving to provide them the best quality life, whether it be their feed, whether it be like this time of year, some of them are in buildings, some of them are spread out on large acreage, some of them are in the barns. So do they have enough bedding? Your ultimate goal is to raise a quality animal so that it in turn is a quality product for your consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's second guessing. I sometimes call it my spidey sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, go back. Is that right? Is that enough? Is it? That never ends. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think it's a good thing. But I would say that is like one of my biggest challenges. It's just this constant second guessing, and it's not for lack of confidence. It's not for anything like that. I mean, really, it's more or less, I want to make sure that when I get home at night, that I took care of their needs, that I met their needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That doesn't ever stop. That is probably my biggest challenge.
Okay. And it doesn't sound like you're unconfident, and that's coming from someone who's extremely unconfident. So don't worry about that.
I mean, not that I don't have my moments of lacking confidence in myself, but it's more or less my ultimate goal is to raise a quality product for the consumer. And in doing that, making sure that the quality of life for that animal, for the duration that they're with me, is the best quality that I can offer.
And I think that's an amazing, humane way to look at it, especially when you want to do the best you can to ensure animal safety, food safety, and quality as well, because there's numerous studies about
they're all related.
Yeah. And then I also want to know, what advice would you give to people? Your first person you're giving advice to is someone who wants to go into farming. The second person is the person who is, but wants to take the next step into, okay, I'm not raising this for the people on my block, but I'm raising it as my source of income.
So what would my advice be to someone who wants to get into farming? Fall in love with it. Fall in love with it, because honestly, you've got to really enjoy it. Because there's going to be times where it's tough, and that actually is almost advice to both. If you're in it, you've got to be in love with it, because at some juncture you're going to be put in a situation where something will happen because they're animals and life happens, and you will not be able to get the animal to a finished product in time, and you're going to have to, dispatch an animal. You have to be there at that place that you can do that. You have to be able to make the decision, like, this is going to be a disaster, cut my losses now. This vegetable crop is not going to make it. It froze out. You have to be in love with what you're doing in order to accept the losses.
Yeah.
Whether you're wanting to get into it or you are already in it. The one thing, if you're already in it and you're wanting to take the next step, there are so many opportunities out there. Grants, more education. That from when I first came home from college 12 years ago now to now, the amount of opportunities out there is tenfold. Furthering your education, financial support, they are out there. Search for them so that you aren't putting yourself in this massive hole. At the same time, there are different lenders who are willing to work with young farmers so that you can go out and spend a little bit of money and get some equipment that is appropriate for you or your operation, or to help you purchase a small farm.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the USDA grants and loans out there are really geared to help people be connected to their food source.
Yes.
And I think that one thing that a lot of municipalities realized during COVID was the breakdown in the supply chain, which made me not have toilet paper. It's an embarrassing.
That's a whole nother podcast that we can do on that one.
Yeah, well, we can. We'll just schedule it for the future. We'll do a podcast exclusively how I ran out of toilet paper, and I still don't know where to get it.
You do understand the concept of why we ran out of domestic toilet paper, correct?
I understand it, and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what I think it is because 40% of the time people were going to the restroom or at their workplace. So most toilet paper was like what you get from a Uline or a Aramark, and the fact that those weren't into the supply chain anymore, and people were being forced to work from home, that the increase went from 60 to 100%.
Correct.
Yes. See,
Correct.
I'm more than just a dumb butcher.
Some days I'm more than just a dumb farmer.
uh, actually, I learned that on a podcast. No, I did. Yeah, it's not like it didn't exist anymore. It's just that our needs shifted, and then
Exactly.
the we had meat reserves. That's another thing. We just it was just a real test on getting them out of the deep storage they were in to get them to the supermarket. There's a breakdown in transportation. The meat was there.
Yep.
But we could record a whole podcast about that. But we got to find 2 other examples besides meat and toilet paper. Yeah. But Jen, I want tell me again who you are, where you're located, and how they could contact and stuff like that.
So I am Jennifer from Three Sisters Family Farms. We are located on Whidbey Island. You can reach us via our website or a phone number. Website is www.threesistersbeef.com. You can find our phone number, all of our information, contact information, price sheets on there, or you can visit us at our store in Coopville 7 days a week.
Awesome. And I'll have all that information in the show notes. Just when you go to the website and you reach out to them, they sell halves, quarters, half lamb, hog, all that. You could, all your protein needs, fill your order, and then do a pickup. So, so if you're not like, I can't go to Coopville just for this, stock your freezer. So,
yep. Yep. We'll sell you stuff in bulk, or you can buy it by the individual cut.
Awesome. All right. That's going to be a big thanks to Jen. And if you want to be on the show, just email me, travismeatstockstill@gmail.com. That's Travis, MEATSTOCKSTILL@gmail.com. If you want to help out the show, please leave a review. Not just a 5-star, but also write something nice. Take a screenshot of it, send it to me, and I will reshare it. It'd be doing me a huge favor, doing us a huge favor. The Meat Block crew over here, working hard behind the scenes, trying to scale, trying to staff. Harrison is still a temp at this point, but hopefully we'll get there. Another way to support the show is by checking out funzolpd.com. Their link is in the show notes. Also check out smartlockerusa.com. That link will also be there. Also check out Three Sisters Cattle Company. That link will also be in there. And I hope everyone has an amazing 2023. And keep your knives sharp. Stay in the margin.